I'm Merquita from Pozible, and I'm here to give a general introduction to what crowdfunding is, and also go over some of the tips that we've found have helped creators to be successful from the many projects that we've worked with. Pozible started in 2010 in Sydney, and at the time that we began, we were the only crowdfunding platform in Australia. We've since helped over 10,000 projects raise more than 43 million Australian dollars, and we have the highest success rate for any platform out there, which I think comes down to the amount of help that we offer creators. So if at any point during the preparation of a project or while it's running, if you have questions or if you want us to go over plans with you, give advice, we're quite happy to do that, and it's because we want to see our projects be successful. There are three things that kind of set crowdfunding apart from different types of fundraising activities. First of all, you have to have a target. That's the amount that you're hoping to raise. Now, we generally say it's quite challenging to set a target because obviously if you can raise $100,000, why would you set your target at $10,000? But how do you know that you can raise $100,000? So a good measure to go by is usually how much can you raise in 1 week. We generally see projects being successful if they can raise 30% of their target in their first week. So if your target's $10,000, could you quite easily raise $3,000 of that on week 1 from your immediate supporters? 30% is also important to take into account because that's the point at which we see people that aren't directly connected to you, so not your friends, not your family, are going to start to pledge to a project. Before then, people tend to think that a project's not going to be successful and they're less likely to pledge. And that's also the reason why you want to get to that 30% mark as quickly as you can. So think about how quickly can I raise 30% in my first week. If you think it would be a bit challenging, then maybe you need to moderate your target down. If you think it'll be easy, then you can kind of set a higher target. It's important to note that Pozible takes an all or nothing approach to crowdfunding, which means you have to hit your target in order to get any of the funds that you've raised. This can sound kind of harsh, and we have had people ask us if we can kind of be flexible on this and let them get whatever they do raise during that period of time. But the reason that we've stuck to having this all or nothing target is we find it really motivates people to pledge. If someone thinks, whether or not I chip in this $50, you're still going to get whatever you raise. It's not quite the urgency as if it were, if I don't pledge and if they don't hit their target, they're not going to get any of the money at all. Often we find projects raising $10,000, sometimes $100,000 just in their last day, and that's because of the target. If there wasn't a target, you wouldn't see that kind of raise. It's also important to look at platforms that do offer flexible funding. So, for instance, Indiegogo, which is probably the major platform that does allow you to keep whatever you do raise, their success rate for projects is about 9%, whereas ours is 65%. And a big part of that comes from putting that target in place. Along with the monetary target, you also need to set a time frame for how long your project will stay up on the site. Now, the maximum that we allow is 60 days, and it's quite easy for projects to say, I'm just going to go for 60 days because I want the longest possible, I want the most time, I want to feel safe. But we haven't seen any correlation between the length that a project is up and how much it raises. A lot of people will go for 60 days because they think it's safe. I want to have the most time possible. I want to have a lot of lead time to kind of improvise. But it's important to note that we don't see any correlation between the length that a project is up and how much it raises. Often what we do see is projects raising the most money when they first launch, when they're first getting the word out there, and just before they end, again because of that target and people are kind of coming together and trying to get them to reach it. What you will see for all projects is what we call the U-curve, which is again that burst of activity right at the beginning and right at the end. And we find that when you stretch a campaign out, all you really tend to extend is that downtime in the middle where there's not very much happening. And the reason is most people will go in and say, this is a great campaign, but they've still got 4 weeks left. I'll come back later and pledge, and then they forget, which is quite a natural thing to happen. So it can often be good to run a shorter campaign and just really focus your efforts in there and try to get the pledges converting as quickly as possible. So 30 days is more than enough for most campaigns. The only time that I would recommend running a longer campaign is if you've actually got a very solid plan for what you're going to do over that time. perhaps there's a particular event coming up that you would like your campaign to stretch over, or a convention or something timely that's going to be released in the news. Those are good reasons to have a longer campaign. But if you're just stretching it out because you want to give yourself more time, then just acknowledge that you are going to be stretching out the kind of quiet periods of your campaign. We've also had creators that have run campaigns with us every year. We have this lady in Perth called Megan Henry, who runs a little bakery business from home called Little Sweet, and she's run 3 campaigns with us, and each campaign has gotten shorter because she's gotten better at it and she knows what to do to get people to pledge, and she just wants to get it over with. It can be really stressful to run a campaign, and if you can concentrate your efforts into a smaller period, then that does reduce the workload for you quite a bit. The other thing that's important to note about the U-curve is that it happens to everybody, and if you've spoken to anybody who's run a campaign before, they will tell you that that bottom of the U can be incredibly demoralizing. You feel like, I thought this was a good idea, people told me that they would pledge, why is nobody pledging, why has it gone quiet, You start worrying that you're going to fail. But the important thing to note is that everybody goes through it. Very, very few campaigns manage to keep up a regular pledge throughout the campaign. Most often, all that work that you're doing in the middle will only start to pay off in the last couple of days of the campaign when people realize that they have to get their act together or they're going to miss it completely. So when you do hit that quiet period, don't feel discouraged, just keep at it, keep plugging it, because it will come through in the end. The last thing about crowdfunding that makes it different from just traditional donating is that you're giving people rewards in return for the pledges that they're making. This is quite an important distinction, and it can be quite stressful to creators to think about, well, what am I going to be able to give people? How am I going to create these things? I don't have a lot of time, I don't have a lot of resources, I don't want to spend a lot of money creating the rewards, and there is a danger sometimes for creators to spend so much money on the rewards that they don't have much money left over to actually do the project itself. So we generally recommend to try to be creative with your rewards and think of things that you can create that aren't expensive, that come from stuff that you are already making as a process of running your project. For instance, the campaigns that ran in the last round, there was one that was for the legless lizards, and one of their rewards is that you could name a lizard, and they already had these records of all the lizards that they'd caught and identified. So it was just a matter of pulling those up and saying, okay, this one's going to be called Legolas, or this one's going to be called, Tony, depending on what people had said. So it wasn't costing them any money. They just had to make up a little certificate and send that out. Other ones did things where you could spend a day having a picnic on the reserve, which again, yes, it will take time from the person that's putting that picnic together, but compared to, having to go and get t-shirts costed and printed, it was very economical, and it also gave people the chance to interact with their community, which is an important aspect of rewards. In a traditional donation sense, you're giving money and you get a thank you card and that's it. But try to think of ways that you can actually get people involved in the campaign, get them to meet you, get them to see the things that they're protecting or the things that their money is contributing towards, and you will win a supporter who is a lot more likely to give again in the future and to be really invested in the future of your project as well. Recognition rewards are ways of saying thank you to people that have pledged to your campaign. And you shouldn't underestimate how special it makes people feel to be thanked in different ways. We've had campaigns say that the recognition rewards were what made their campaign go. That was what was most appealing to people. These can range from written thank yous, postcards that are personally from the team, or shout outs on Facebook or Twitter, even to where if they're funding a particular building or particular area, actually having their name printed on that building or that area for people to see. We've also had recognition rewards that are a bit more cheeky. So for instance, we had a member of our team run a campaign for his Action Sports Film Festival, and one of the rewards he said was that he would Photoshop your face onto an 80s film poster. And of course, the results were very hilarious. It wasn't very good Photoshop, but it didn't matter. He would post it on Facebook and tag you in it, and then people would share it because it was just so hilarious and unexpected. And that was a kind of a clever way for him to stretch the impact of his campaign, because people were finding out about it because their friends were sharing these silly photos of them on Facebook. And then they saw, hey, there's this campaign, maybe I'm going to pledge as well. The second kind of reward are tangible rewards, which means you're actually getting some kind of product or thing that you can hold in your hand for your contribution. And this is what scares not-for-profits. They don't have a lot of money to kind of rustle together things. So what we usually recommend is look at the network that you have and think if there's anybody in that network that can offer something for free, that can contribute a reward to your campaign. This has the benefit of not just giving you something that you can give to supporters, but also making that person now feel invested in your campaign. For instance, we had a project which was trying to raise money for their local pub, which had burnt down. And they actually got all their local businesses involved in contributing rewards. So they had the local kind of steel worker create a fire pit that was unique and that actually had the pub's wording printed on it. And if you bought the fire pit, proceeds of that went to the campaign. Or it could be something, perhaps you know somebody who can contribute a certain skill or run a workshop, or someone who's a really good baker and wouldn't mind making a couple of cheesecakes for your campaign. Rewards don't always have to be linked to the campaign exactly, as long as there's something that you're giving to people to thank them for their contribution. Another example is one of our research campaigns was a bunch of geologists who were going to the desert to look for meteorites, and they actually had a friend who made jewelry, so they picked up some stones that they found on their journey and asked them to commission kind of necklaces, earrings, stuff that was really easy and cheap to create because they were giving the raw materials to the jewelry maker, but that people actually really love to receive as well. So be creative in the kind of things that you have access to and how you give those out to people. The third kind of rewards are intangible rewards, which is an experience that you're receiving. So our environmental groups are really good with this. They took people on the tour of the sanctuaries that they were protecting. You can do lectures for school groups. You can do barbecues that you invite people to. You can do question and answer things. Just think about different things that people may want to experience rather than, actually getting a product, but ways that they can connect with your cause and with your team as well. An experience reward is just the chance to give someone the opportunity to experience something that they wouldn't be able to experience outside of a campaign. And again, to let them get to know you and your cause better and to hopefully be more invested in what you're doing. We even had campaigns that said you can come and volunteer with us as a reward, which is technically, it's not a reward because then you're still giving of your time. But people loved it because they wanted to be a part of it. That's why they were pledging to the project, and this gave them an opportunity to be a part of it. And it actually expanded the base of volunteers that the project had in the process. So the key to rewards is to be really creative, to think of something that will appeal to everyone. It's almost as if you're thinking about all the different groups that could be interested in pledging to your project, and then saying, well, what would this person want to receive? Not everybody's going to want to get an experience. Not everybody's going to want to just get a thank you. So there's different levels of what people want to receive, and you should make sure that those are all covered. We generally say 5 to 8 rewards is a good number, and you should keep in mind that the most popular tiers on Pozible are $50, $25, and $100 in that exact order. So make sure that those tiers are covered. Rewards are also a good way to kind of think about, how do I get someone who was going to pledge $25 to maybe pledge $40? I find that people generally know how much they're going to pledge when they go into a campaign, but can you coax them to give maybe a little bit more? Another thing to consider with rewards are ones that take into account a group. For instance, a candlelight dinner, or a lecture that's going to have up to 5 people, or maybe tickets to your next trivia night, but for 2 people rather than just for 1. It's a good opportunity to get people to involve other people rather than just pledging for themselves. We've also had campaigns that really target local businesses or corporates that they think might pledge to their campaign, and kind of tailoring a sponsorship package for $500 up to $10,000 that involves the corporates as a team and looks out for what they would be looking for. For instance, team volunteering or an event in a special venue, all those kinds of things. So really think about the different target audiences that you're looking at and how that campaign is going to cover all those different rewards that people are going to be looking for. Now, why would you crowdfund? What are the reasons that people crowdfund other than obviously getting the funding? Well, the first thing is that you have full control and ownership over the money that you raise because you're raising them directly from supporters who are aware of your project. Often when people go to a government grant which they apply for or a bank loan, there may be certain areas that they're actually not allowed to use that funding for, whether it's paying for wages or building a new part of their building, whatever it is, there's always limitations. And they're also answerable to those people on a much higher level. Often grants need to be acquitted. You need to make sure that whatever you said you'd spend the money on, you spent it the right way. Now, crowdfunding gives you a lot more freedom because crowdfunding supporters are not interested really in how many cents you spent on XYZ. As long as you've generally spent the money towards, the general cause that you set out in your crowdfunding campaign, they're happy with that. So we're actually finding groups using crowdfunding as a way to raise money that gives them greater control over how they spend that money, or to fill in the gaps where other grants or other funding sources have not been able to deliver. At the end of running a campaign, you don't just have the money, but you have a group of people that have believed in your idea enough to put that money down. And you now know that wherever you go, you're going to be able to build on that network. Capacity building is a big thing in any not-for-profit organization, and it's very, very substantial to be able to say, we've not only raised this money, but we've actually expanded our pool of volunteers or our pool of potential donors for the future. So crowdfunding can give you a lot of potential in that way. Another thing that we're seeing is that increasingly crowdfunding is being recognized by governments, by banks, by investors as kind of proof that the people running this organization know what they're doing and they're capable of marketing themselves. You can now state that crowdfunding is a way that you're getting partial funding when you apply for a grant. And we've also had creators that take the funding that they raise and then they go and win more stable funding on a bigger level from banks, from investors, or from grant bodies. We've also had campaigns that didn't reach their target. This was true of the last round of environmental campaigns that we ran. There were one or two that just couldn't reach the target that they set out. And even those said to us that the awareness that they raised, the kind of capacity building among their usual group of donors, and within that community, the people that now said, I'm willing to volunteer, was so useful, as well as the skills that they learned through having to market themselves and make a video and all of these things. And they're planning to run campaigns again to get access to that match funding. So there is a lot of potential in kind of non-monetary things that you gain from a campaign. We had a campaign last year that was trying to raise $2 million to build a new school for Port Melbourne. And they only raised $60,000, which could be seen as a huge failure. But the press attention that they got from that campaign and kind of the awareness that they built up in the community and, the opinions that they got that were raised, the discussions, the forums, it ended up in attracting investors who came in and said, we'll put the money down to help you build this school. So even when you don't reach a target, a campaign can be incredibly useful to a team just in building that awareness. Campaigns are also really useful in terms of testing an idea. Perhaps you want to try something very different that doesn't fall under any particular grant that you've received in the past, and you just want to see whether your community would be up for it. It could be, I'm going to start running tours in my group for this area that I manage. It could be a new volunteer program. It could be, I'm going to publish a cookbook to do with all the things that you can forage from this plot of land that I'm looking after. And what you can do is actually just test, without risking anything except the time that you put into the campaign, whether this idea has legs, whether it could become a sustainable funding method for you in the future. Crowdfunding is a really good way to do that because you don't actually have to borrow money from a bank and then have to pay back the loans in order to make it happen. All you do is go to the people that you think would be interested, say, if you're interested, put money down, and then if it's successful, great. If it's not, you haven't really lost anything in the process. So be creative about how you're going to put this project together and think about what ideas maybe were not feasible in the past that could be feasible now and that you want to test with crowdfunding. I'm now going to be talking about some tips that we've found have helped our project creators to be successful. The first would be to have a very strong, compelling, personal story. Now, this is something that big brands and businesses that are starting to come to crowdfunding are finding difficult because they always want to hide behind their messaging or their branding, those kinds of things. Whereas we found that crowdfunding is most effective when you're reaching out to people on a personal level and connecting to them with a really strong story. So think about the cause that you're working towards. What is interesting about it? What would appeal to the public? You may be very buried in the details of it and the jargon, but make sure that you're making it accessible to people. Write out a pitch that you could read in 2 to 5 minutes, and this will be helpful when it comes to doing your video as well. That just encapsulates what it's about, why it's important, and what's the urgency. Why is it that people need to pledge now? It's important to note that you will need to state as a part of your campaign what you're spending the funds on. So you would need to give a rough breakdown, the different things that money is going to go towards. And while it could often be going towards things like buying staplers or staple bullets for the office, try to think about what you're going to use the money on that's going to be the most appealing to people. So do or die tends to be kind of a good one that gets people together around an urgent message. It's saying, if we don't get this money, we're not going to be able to do this really important program that's going to make a difference to us as an organization and also these threatened species that we're trying to preserve. Be really, really compelling, thoughtful, and creative and personal about it. Tell people about your struggles, why you're here at this point, and why this is going to make a huge difference on a broader scheme. The next component that's really important is to have good graphics and visuals. And by this, I'm really referring to the images that you're using throughout the campaign to promote on social media, and also that one image that you're going to choose to represent your campaign as the main project image. And that's going to appear across the website. Whenever you promote it on social media, that image is going to come up. Make sure that it's something that really draws people to it, that makes people want to click on it and find out more. And this often means finding someone in your networks who's a good photographer if you don't have images that are available. And it doesn't even have to be someone that you hire who's expensive. Again, it could just be someone who's really handy with a camera phone. Another really important element is to have a good video. And again, this does not need to cost you a lot of money. You can pull in favors, or if you have a camera phone, you can pretty much make it yourself. Just to make sure that the essence of your story is there. Again, the video is very effective because it's a way to connect to people personally, to actually put your face out there or somebody from your team who's very well spoken, and having that personal touch to it as opposed to getting people to read a lot of text. You want to keep in mind that people spend about 3 minutes on average on a crowdfunding page, including the time it takes to pledge, put in their credit card details, all of that kind of stuff. So don't make your video longer than 2 minutes. If you have to, make sure that the important information is really in the first minute. And also make sure that people are going to be able to watch this anywhere on social media, outside of your campaign page, and know what you're talking about and how to get to your project page and why they have to pledge. Because often the video will end up shared, and if you don't put a link back or any information like that, it's going to be wasted. A really good example of a project that used video well was a research project that was looking at maggots and how they can help in the study of flesh-eating bacteria. So not very visually appealing subjects at all, but they actually kind of made the most of it. So the first video they had was of their researchers just addressing the camera, giving a really personal appeal and talking about why the research was important. And they actually found that hardly anybody was watching this video. It was just too overwhelming, too much information. So 2 weeks into their campaign, they changed their video for one where they dipped maggots in paint, put them on canvas and sped it up so you could actually see the maggots painting a picture. And these pictures were given away as rewards, which are incredibly cheap, obviously, to create because it's free labor. But this video was so different, kind of disgusting, kind of fascinating, and it was watched many, many more times than the first one, and it was shared many more times, which helped to kind of extend the reach of the project and get attention. So there's many ways that you can do a good video. Often humor and personality play a big role in that, so make sure that you're choosing the team members and the way that your story is being laid out in a good way. Another thing that's really important is having a well thought out, well planned promotional strategy in place. A lot of creators get carried away with, okay, I've got to make a video, I've got to do all the rewards, I've got to make sure my story's there, but they forget that they've actually got to be promoting the campaign while it's out. Again, remember that you've got to get at least 30% of your support from your supporters before anybody else is going to think about pledging to your campaign. How are you going to reach those people, and how are you going to reach beyond the people that you already know? This often is just a matter of writing out a list of, these are all the target audiences that I think would pledge to my campaign, and these are the strategies I have for reaching them. So it's important to note that different people will be reached in different ways. Younger people will probably be more active on Facebook or Twitter or social media. Older people, you may need to reach out to them in ways like seeing them face to face, going to a town hall meeting. A lot of our environmental projects had success in their communities by plugging into the events that were actually happening while the campaign was running. So going to a pub and saying, hey, I know you have this trivia night that you run every week. Could we perhaps take one and dedicate it to this particular cause? Or if there's a convention coming up or an open mic or any kind of event, just be creative in talking to them and saying, look, this is a really good cause. How can we be part of it? How can we spread the word? Even if it's just you standing up for 5 minutes and telling people at that event why this project is important. Think of different ways you can reach out to people. And plan as much as you can beforehand, because once the campaign starts, you're going to be really busy and you want to have that freedom to improvise if things don't go to plan and to think of other strategies that you could implement. So again, think of what you're going to be doing every point of every day that the campaign is running, so that as soon as you launch, you can just kind of roll out these strategies and not have to be kind of thinking of what content you're going to put or what email you're going to send at different times. Once you map out your contacts and the people you have in your networks, you will probably be surprised at how many people are actually there and what the potential is to reach out to these people in different ways. Make sure you put as much thought into it as you put into any other aspect of your campaign. And again, if you're kind of lost, if you think that you've kind of reached the end of your ideas, feel free to schedule a chat with us because we can kind of help you there. Your promotional strategy should also be a matter of not just reaching out to people you already know, but how do you get these people to share it with their friends and family, to tell other people about it. That's incredibly important to reaching new audiences that you don't already have access to. The vast majority of campaigns that have run with us, especially in the environmental space, have said that the key advantage other than funding that they got through the campaign was expanding their reach in terms of people in the community that were willing to donate in the future or willing to volunteer, or just people that knew and now cared about this issue or were aware that it was there. So that's something that you want to take into account when you plan a promotional strategy. Thinking about how you reach out to media, getting in touch with different groups that maybe do the same thing that you do, but in other areas. They will probably be willing to help you as well. Another thing to think about in terms of crowdfunding is to keep everybody who's supported updated with what's going on. Often creators think, my goal is just to get somebody to pledge and that's it. And then they kind of forget about people once they've pledged. But every person that's pledged to your campaign is someone who now has the potential to go and share it because they've cared about it enough to actually put money down. So through Pozible, you can leave updates for everybody who's pledged to your campaign. And you can make these private or public, which means that it will either only be shown to people who have pledged or it will be shown to everybody on the site. And it's really good to schedule in as part of your promotional strategy what you will be telling to people at every stage of the campaign, celebrating with them your early victories. Hey everybody, we reached 10% in an hour, that's fantastic, thanks to all of you. Or sending them a special picture of your team working behind the scenes. People are pledging because they want to feel like they're contributing to something bigger than themselves. So it's your job to make sure that they do feel that. And every update that you send is an opportunity for people to share it with other people and to kind of build the momentum of your campaign that way. It's also important to use updates when things are perhaps not going very well. So maybe after a campaign, you promised to deliver a particular reward and now you can't, or it's going to be delayed. We find that as long as you keep people updated, you let them know what's happening, they're very understanding. We only tend to get angry emails or concerned calls from people when they haven't heard from the creator at all. So don't ever go silent. Remember, these people have been with you on this journey and they know what you're facing and they know what your struggles are. So just be honest and transparent with them and they will really appreciate that. So what do you actually need to run a campaign on Pozible? Well, it has to be a project, which just means it has to have a clear beginning and ending and an outcome where everybody can say, okay, this is completed, my money went to the right place, the end. So you can't just say, I'm a not-for-profit, I need your donations. It has to be, perhaps you need to meet the next rent check, or you need a certain amount of money to buy new equipment or weed killer, whatever it is. It has to be something that's very clearly project-based. You should factor in the fees that are involved in a crowdfunding campaign. So there's a platform fee of 5% generally of anything that you raise. If you don't reach your target, fees are not charged. There's also payment fees of about 2.4%, which means that most of our creators are generally set aside 8% to cover fees, and that's just part of their budget. So be aware of that upfront. So that's crowdfunding in a nutshell. Remember, if you have any additional questions or you want help, you want us to take a look at your campaign and give you some advice, just get in touch with us and we'll help you as best as we can. Thanks for your time and good luck.